He stripped away who I was piece by piece, and I let him, until I couldn't anymore. I wasn't always this quiet. I wasn't always afraid of footsteps in the hallway or the sound of a key turning in the lock. I used to be full of life, confident, educated, fiercely independent, but somehow, slowly, I became someone I didn't recognize. I learned to keep my voice down, to walk on eggshells, to apologize for things I didn't do. And every night, I told myself it would get better, but it didn't. She cried in silence, night after night, trying not to wake her daughter sleeping in the next room. People used to admire our marriage. Mark was charming in public, always smiling, always composed. No one knew what happened behind closed doors. The bruises were always where clothes could hide them. The insults were whispered, strategic, deliberate. He chipped away at me like I was stone. And eventually, I stopped fighting. I was nothing to him, not a partner, not a person, just a possession he could control. The worst part wasn't the violence. It was the erasure, the way he made me feel like I didn't exist unless he needed something. I wasn't Diana anymore. I was hay. I was silence. I was obedience. But even in that darkness, a small part of me held on. For Mara, for the little girl who looked at me like I still had power, even when I didn't believe it myself. He broke me first, but I knew I couldn't let him break her too. I shielded Mara from everything I could. I smiled through bruised ribs. I read her bedtime stories with trembling hands. I told her Daddy was tired, busy, stressed, anything but violent, anything but cruel. I thought if I could just keep pretending, she'd never have to carry the weight I did. But lies, even protective ones, have a cost. And every time I lied to her, a piece of me shattered. Mark controlled everything: money, groceries, who I could talk to. I had no phone that he didn't monitor, no friends I could call without raising suspicion. I wasn't just isolated, I was erased. And still, he thought I would stay, like I had nowhere else to go, like fear would keep me chained. And for a while he was right. Fear did keep me quiet, but not blind. I saw everything. I remembered everything. There were nights I stared at the ceiling, planning, not escapes, just survival. I hid money in a hollowed-out book. I memorized safe routes to my mother's house. I practiced what I'd say if I ever had 5 minutes to leave. She planned it all, in the quiet, between bruises and bedtime stories. And even when hope felt foolish, I kept it alive, because one day I knew I would need it. He always said no one would believe me, that I was too emotional, too dramatic. And honestly, part of me believed him. That's what abusers do. They rewrite your reality until you can't trust your own thoughts. But deep down, I knew the truth. And the truth came out in the way I flinched when he raised his voice, in the way Mara clung to me when he entered a room, in the way I looked in the mirror and couldn't meet my own eyes. There were no police reports, no hospital visits, just a woman hiding her pain, keeping her child safe, and praying no one ever saw what was happening, because nobody believed her without proof, and proof meant more risk. More violence, so I kept quiet. Until the silence became too heavy to carry, I started keeping notes, dates, details, voice recordings I emailed to myself when he wasn't looking. I found the messages he sent to his brother, mocking me, bragging about how he kept me in line, and that's when something shifted. I stopped waiting to be saved. I started preparing to save myself, and I promised, if he ever touched Mara, there would be no more waiting, because I could handle being broken. But if he ever laid a hand on our daughter, even once, she finally left wouldn't just be a dream. It would be real, permanent, unforgiving. He didn't raise his hand at first. He raised expectations, only to crush them later. In the beginning, he was everything. The man who opened doors, who remembered coffee orders, who said all the right things to my friends and looked at me like I was his entire world. He was thoughtful, attentive, charming, and I fell hard, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to believe in something real. And he gave me just enough truth to disguise the manipulation. I was deceived, not because I was foolish, but because he was intentional. When I told people I was marrying Mark, no one blinked. He was the golden boy, handsome, successful, persuasive. He made everyone feel special, including me. And in those first few months, it was almost perfect. But now I see it clearly. The subtle digs, the possessiveness disguised as passion, the little test to see how far he could push me. She planned it all wasn't just about me, it was him too. He was planning control from the start. The first red flag didn't look red at all. It looked like love. When I got pregnant, he told me I didn't have to work anymore, that I should rest, that he wanted to take care of everything. At first, it felt sweet, protective even, but soon it became suffocating. Suddenly, I was ungrateful if I mentioned missing work, selfish if I said I needed space. That's when I started to disappear. He started checking my phone, asking where I was every second, commenting on how I dressed. "You're a mother now," he'd say. "You don't need to impress anyone," but I knew what he meant. Stay small, stay silent, stay his. He said it was for our family, but he thought I would stay locked in that role forever. A housewife without a voice, a mother without a name. I remember the way he'd say, "You're so lucky I take care of everything," and how that stopped sounding generous and started sounding like a warning. If I disagreed, I was hysterical. If I cried, I was unstable. Slowly, everything I said was twisted. He'd say I was overreacting, that I should smile more, that maybe motherhood was making me irrational. Gaslighting wrapped in concern. He isolated me under the guise of love. Told me my friends were jealous, that my coworkers didn't respect me, that my mother was too involved. It was so gradual I didn't even see it happening. One by one, my lifelines disappeared, and he made sure nobody believed her, because by the time I started to question him, there was no one left to hear me. At night, I'd lie awake next to him, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I got here. How the man who once held my face and said he'd protect me now made me feel like I was constantly walking a tightrope. But I kept telling myself, he's just stressed. It's just temporary. I was trying to protect the illusion, trying to avoid the truth I already felt deep down. I stopped recognizing myself. I went from confident to cautious, from outspoken to careful. I picked words like I was defusing a bomb. Every conversation felt like a test. And the worst part? He knew. He knew exactly how to keep me off balance. Because he broke me first not with fists, but with doubt. Doubt in myself. Doubt in my worth. Doubt in my own memory. Still, I stayed. Not because I was weak, but because I had hope. That maybe the old version of him was still in there somewhere. That if I loved hard enough, tried hard enough, held on long enough, things would go back to the way they were. But that version of him was never real. It was bait. The hook that kept me anchored in hell. And just when I thought I'd adjusted to the pain, the illusion shattered completely. Because the day he raised his hand for the first time, there was no more pretending. He didn't just hit me. He rewrote the rules of who I was allowed to be. It started with a slap. Just one. Sharp. Unexpected. We were arguing, if you could even call it that. I told him I wasn't ready to quit my job, that I needed something for myself, something that made me feel like more than just his shadow. He didn't yell, he didn't warn me, he just did it. My cheek stung, my ears rang, and the world tilted for a moment. He looked at me like I made him do it. He broke me first, not with the slap, but with the silence that followed. He didn't apologize. He made excuses, said I pushed him, said I was disrespectful, too emotional. And for a second, God help me, I believed him. That's how deep the conditioning went. He wrapped abuse in logic, violence in reason. And that night, she cried in silence, not from the pain, but from the shame of questioning her own instincts. It escalated fast after that. Not immediately, but steadily. Slaps turned into shoves, shoves into scalding tea spilled by accident. Belts left out in plain sight became weapons when I didn't agree fast enough. I started tracking time by bruises, when one would fade, just in time for the next. I was nothing to him, not even human, just something to punish when the illusion of control slipped from his grip. I stopped talking back, not because I agreed, but because I wanted to survive. I learned how to anticipate his moods, how to avoid triggering his rage. I learned that quiet was safer than honesty, and I hated myself for it. But I had a daughter, a life, a thin thread of hope that maybe, if I just endured long enough, it would stop. But he thought I would stay, and that's what kept him bold. He became two people, the one the world saw, charming, generous, dependable, and the one behind closed doors. A monster with measured hands. He never left a mark on my face, just my back, my arms, my thighs, places he knew no one would see. He planned it all, the way he hurt, the way he justified, the way he stayed clean in public. I stopped taking photos, stopped writing, stopped calling my mother, because every connection became a liability. Every conversation was a potential interrogation. When he checked my phone, he used fear like currency, and every time I tried to breathe, he took another piece. I was fading. I could feel it. And still, I stayed. For Mara, for the fragile illusion that I could shield her by sacrificing myself. But children always notice. One night, she touched the bruise on my wrist and asked, "Did Daddy do that?" I lied. I smiled. I said I fell, and she nodded, but her eyes didn't believe me. That look haunts me, because nobody believed her either. Not really. Not yet. But she knew. She felt it in the tension, in the tears I tried to swallow before story time. I started journaling in code, scribbles only I could decipher, notes hidden behind books, memories I needed to preserve, in case one day I couldn't speak for myself. I started collecting evidence, not because I was ready to run, but because I knew the day might come when I had to prove I wasn't crazy. When the truth came out, I wanted it to roar, not whisper, and still, I held on, hoping, stupidly, that love would return, that the man I married would see what he was becoming. But love doesn't live where terror sleeps. And the night he raised, the belt while Mara cried in the next room, I knew the next blow wouldn't be mine to carry, and that would be the moment everything changed. The moment he touched her, he lost me forever. There are things you can survive that you never thought possible, bruises that fade, words that echo for years but eventually lose power. I told myself I could take it, that if I just absorbed the blows, I was protecting Mara, that if I stood between him and her, she'd grow up untouched by the darkness we lived in. But pain has a way of seeping through cracks, and one night, it broke through everything. He broke me first, yes, but this time, he broke something much deeper. It was a Tuesday, rainy, ordinary. We were having dinner, quiet, tense. Mara spilled her juice, not on purpose, just the kind of thing any child might do. But Mark snapped. He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Before I could even speak, his hand came down across her tiny cheek. The sound of it split the air. She froze. So did I. Time stopped. She cried in silence, too shocked to scream. And I saw red. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I stood between them, shielding her with my body. And for the first time, he looked afraid. Not of me, but of what he had just done. There was no hiding this. No excuse. No bruise he could bury under sleeves. He hid his own child. And in that moment, the truth came out. This wasn't a marriage. It was a war zone. Later that night, I held Mara until she fell asleep, her small fingers still trembling. She didn't ask questions. She didn't say why, because she already knew. She'd seen too much, felt too much. I looked at her and realized I was nothing to him, but to her, I was everything. And if I stayed, I was teaching her that love looked like pain, that safety was something we only pretended to have. I couldn't sleep. I lay there replaying every moment. Every time I told her he was just tired. Every time I smiled through a bruise. Every time I made excuses. Nobody believed her because I kept making the lie look beautiful, but not anymore. I wasn't just fighting for survival. I was fighting to stop the cycle. Because children don't become what you say. They become what they see. He tried to act normal the next day, offered to drive Mara to school, kissed my cheek like the night before hadn't happened. That's how deep his delusion went. He thought I would stay, even after hitting our daughter. He underestimated the storm that was building in my silence. He still saw the version of me who flinched. He didn't realize I'd already made my decision. I started moving with intention. I checked the emergency bag I'd hidden months before, counted the bills, reviewed the map to my mother's. Every step I'd once planned in fear, I now executed with fury. She planned it all, and now it wasn't just theory. It was time. I wasn't going to wait for the next hit. I wasn't going to let Mara forget how to feel safe. I called my mother, carefully, quietly, told her we might be coming soon. She didn't ask why. She knew. The hesitation in my voice said more than words ever could. She cried, told me she was ready, that our room was still made, that she'd been praying for this day. So I showed him the proof. Not in court, not yet, but in the space I claimed when I stopped flinching and started planning. That night, I kissed Mara's forehead and whispered, "Soon." She smiled, just a little, and I knew she understood. That little smile gave me strength I didn't know I had, because I wasn't just leaving for her. I was becoming someone she could trust to lead her out of the dark. And the next time he left money on the counter, he didn't know it, but he'd just funded our escape. Freedom didn't come with fireworks. It came in the form of a zippered backpack and a child's quiet hand in mine. I didn't tell Mara we were leaving until the moment we were walking out the door, not because I didn't trust her, but because I couldn't risk her hope getting crushed if something went wrong. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head, every route, every bag, every second, but nothing could have prepared me for the weight of that final step, the one that meant we were never going back. She planned it all, and still, my heart raced like it could betray me at any moment. Mark had left money on the kitchen counter, cash from a work bonus, carelessly dropped like everything else he took for granted. He thought it was for groceries. He didn't know it would become our lifeline. I grabbed it without hesitation. That envelope felt like justice, like breath, like my hands finally holding the beginning of a different ending. He never saw it coming. Mara didn't ask questions. She just looked at me, wide-eyed, as I told her we were going to Grandma's. She nodded, held my hand tighter, and grabbed her stuffed bear without a word. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Not until we were 2 blocks away, and I looked back one last time. That house, the one I had once tried to make a home, stood there in silence, stripped of meaning. My silence was my answer, and that goodbye, it was final. We took the bus, 3 transfers, eyes down, hats pulled low. I was shaking the entire time, expecting at any moment for someone to call my name, for him to find us, but no one did. And when we finally reached my mother's house, I didn't knock. I collapsed into her arms, the kind of collapse you only do when your body finally believes it's safe. She cried in silence, but this time, the tears were different, cleansing, real. My mother didn't say I told you so. She didn't ask why I waited. She just held me and Mara, and together, we sat on the floor for what felt like hours, saying everything and nothing. She had known, not all the details, but but enough. And still, she never gave up on me. Nobody believed her, but she waited. She stayed ready. That kind of love saves lives. That day, it saved mine. The next morning, I woke up in a real bed, in a quiet room. No tension, no fear, just sunlight, and my daughter's soft breathing beside me. I watched her sleep like I was seeing her for the first time, unburdened, free. And it hit me then. He thought I would stay, but here I was, wrapped in blankets instead of bruises. We had made it out. I made calls that day, legal ones, protective ones. I contacted my lawyer, told her we were out, sent her everything I had collected, the evidence, the dates, the threats. So I showed him the proof, not to hurt him, but to protect us. This wasn't just escape. It was closure, signed and filed. I changed our numbers, bought a second-hand phone. We got new clothes, new routines. My mother helped me enroll Mara in a different school. It felt surreal, like I was learning how to live again after forgetting for so long. I was nothing to him, but I was becoming everything to myself again. Mara laughed that night, really laughed. It was during dinner. Something silly, my mom said, and that sound shattered me in the best way. I hadn't heard it in months. It reminded me why I fought so hard, why I stayed quiet, why I finally ran, because her joy was the proof that I hadn't failed her completely. But even in freedom, I knew it wasn't over. Not yet, because while we were healing, karma was just getting started. He thought I was the one falling apart. Turns out the fire was never in me. It was behind him, catching up fast. I didn't check up on him after we left. I didn't stalk his social media or ask around. I didn't care where he was or what he was doing. My energy was on healing, rebuilding, and showing Mara that love doesn't leave scars. But karma? She's funny like that. She doesn't need an invitation. She just shows up. And when she does, she exposes him in ways no courtroom ever could. It started with a voicemail from a former coworker of his, casual at first. "Hey, just so you know, he missed a big presentation this week." Then another message. He didn't show up to the quarterly review. At first, I thought maybe he was spiraling, but then I remembered he always depended on control, and now that control was gone. He thought I would stay, keep his world in order, but when I walked out, the structure crumbled. Turns out I had been the one behind the curtains, paying the bills, reminding him of deadlines, keeping the mask in place. Without me, he missed meetings, ignored follow-ups, forgot to file reports. HR flagged it, then corporate took notice. And just like that, the golden boy was suspended, not for abuse, not yet, but for instability and failure to meet leadership expectations. In other words, the fall had begun. I heard he started drinking more, showing up late, lashing out at his team, not physically, just with that same cutting sarcasm I knew too well, the kind that rots a room. And while I was nothing to him, it turns out I was everything holding his chaos together. Without me, he wasn't a man. He was a mask with nothing behind it. Then came the fire, literally. The mansion, the same one he once told me I was lucky to live in, caught fire due to faulty wiring. Some say it was negligence. Others say it was his own carelessness. Either way, the damage was complete. Nothing salvageable. No keepsakes. No records. No reminders of the empire he tried to build on silence. Just ashes. And somewhere in those ashes, I imagine, he finally realized what he lost. She planned it all, yes, but not the fire. That was karma's touch. I didn't have to strike a match. I just had to walk away and let truth do the rest. And the irony, he once told me I'd be homeless without him. Now he was the one couch surfing, while I tucked Mara into bed, beneath a roof built on resilience. Someone sent me a photo. His house, half collapsed. Smoke still rising. I didn't ask for it, didn't seek it, but there it was, and I didn't feel joy. I felt confirmation that the universe doesn't need revenge plans. It just needs time, because the truth came out, and it burned everything he tried to hide. Inside, he called, once. A number I didn't recognize. I answered out of reflex. His voice was low, defeated. He said, "Everything's gone." I said, "We've been gone." Then I hung up. My silence was my answer, and this time it was permanent. No rage, no drama, just a closed door he'll never open again. And as I lit a candle that night in our new home, I thought about all the nights I had feared fire, boiling tea, hot plates, raised voices, and now the flames were behind me, devouring the past. But karma wasn't done with him yet, not until he was left with nothing but himself. He used to tower over me in rage. Now he lies flat in a hospital bed, finally forced to face what he became. I always wondered what it would take for Mark to feel powerless, to feel small, to sit in silence and hear nothing but the echo of his own cruelty. I used to think maybe prison, maybe public shame, but But life had its own plans. One rainy night, while speeding through an empty road, he lost control of his car. They say the impact was violent, the damage irreversible. He never saw it coming, but it came, just the same. Spinal injury, paralysis from the waist down. His body, once used to dominate, intimidate, and hurt, now still, trapped. And I wish I could say I felt joy, that I danced or celebrated or toasted to karma. But the truth is, I didn't feel much at all. Just a deep, resounding confirmation that life always circles back. The truth came out, and this time, it came with metal and consequence. He called from the hospital. A nurse dialed for him, said he asked to speak to his wife. I almost laughed. His wife had vanished a long time ago, but I picked up, just once. His voice was low, shaking. He said, "I think about you and Mara every day." I stayed silent. Let him sit in it. Let him remember that my silence was my answer, and now it was all he had left. He asked if I could visit, said he was lonely, that nobody from his family had come. His friends had drifted. His job, gone. The house, ashes. Rebecca, long gone. I told him softly, "This is what you created, and now you get to live in it." No yelling, no hatred, just truth. He begged then, really begged. He begged her to come back, but that version of me doesn't exist anymore. I hung up and sat with my daughter on the porch that evening. We ate ice cream. She told me about her day, laughed at a joke I barely understood, and I realized I had healed, not because he suffered, but because I no longer carried him with me. I was nothing to him once, but now he was nothing to the life I'd built without him. He remains in that hospital, bitter, forgotten, his body echoing the emotional prison he once locked me inside. People say, you get what you give, and he broke me first, so the universe broke him back. Only it did it in a way even I couldn't have imagined. No more pretending, no more secrets, just a man and the mirror, and the reflection staring back. That's not the charming husband, not the provider, not the mask he wore. It's the abuser, the manipulator, the coward, and there's no audience left to applaud him anymore. Sometimes justice doesn't come with handcuffs. It comes in the form of stillness, in lost power, in knowing the one you tried to destroy is thriving, and you're stuck watching from a bed you can't leave. She exposed him, not with vengeance, but by simply surviving him. I was deceived, yes, beaten, controlled, shamed, but I rose, I left. I built a life he'll never touch. And as for him, he lies in silence now, the very same silence he once used to punish me.